welcome to another episode of Transcontinental Overload. I'm Stephanie, your host, based in sunny New Jersey, and I'm a little homesick today. No, not for Germany as such, but more specifically my home region in Bavaria, southern Germany. Why? Because of this episode. All cross-cultural exploration begins with the experience of being lost. This is a quote by American anthropologist and cross-cultural researcher Edward T. Hall. And I'm including this because it kind of sets the tone for today's episode. I'm very excited to welcome a fellow Bavarian here today. It's none other than Christian Höferle, the culture guy, CEO and president of the Culture Mastery, based in Atlanta here in the US. Christian and I share a very similar background. We grew up at the same time in the very same corner of Bavaria in southern Germany, so naturally there was an instant connection. I was really looking forward to our conversation because I followed what he does for a while, and well, as you know, if you've been around this podcast for a while, I love to talk about all things to do with cross-cultural learning and what it means to be different, how you can learn to belong rather than just fit in, all of that. Christian's business, The Culture Mastery, is a coaching, mentoring and consulting company that helps international companies be successful by teaching people cross-cultural competency. In short, what his company does makes my heart soar. Learning how we can focus on our commonalities rather than just our differences. Learning from each other. I love talking to Christian and hear all about his early days as an exchange student in the US and how that experience shaped his future and made him eventually found the business that he's running today. And well, I guess I should just stop yabbering at this point and let you listen to his story. Here it is. Welcome, Christian, to Transcontinental Overload.
Thanks for having me.
Super happy to have you. Not only, well, you are a very special guest, not only because we share a home country, we also share the same region of that home country. And not only that, but we grew up within, what would you say, 15 miles of each other?
Maybe less. I don't know. Yeah.
Maybe even less. I don't know. And we even know some people. We have some people in common. So
it's kind of an oddity that we didn't go to the same high school, actually, because some of the people
absolutely.
I went to high school with, you knew from your town, right?
Exactly. We were Splitsville. So we went, some of us, and I was desperate to go to your high school. I remember this, and my parents sent me to the other one. So anyway, most of my friends were at your
We both turned out all right, I guess.
That's the other thing we have in common. We both turned out all right, and we both turned out to be living in the US.
Right.
And also, we both did something that I would say not that many people growing up in the 80s and 90s did. We moved abroad and made a new life abroad. We went against the grain. We embraced being different and doing something that, not everybody did at the time and still doesn't do. And that's kind of also what I want to talk about today. How can you make your own sense of self, your otherness, your strength? And so I'm really interested to hear your story and how who you are and your experience of being different has influenced you and led you to create your business. So
let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. And we do obviously need to jump into a bit of your backstory. So why don't we start with that, and then we'll take it from there and see.
Well, as you said, it was a little bit unusual to go abroad at that time when I grew up. Oh, maybe when we both grew up. Going abroad wasn't a big deal per se, because growing up in Germany or within anywhere in Europe, you had different countries at your doorstep. So in our case, where we grew up, it was less than 2 hours to cross an international border. It was less than 3 hours to drive into a country where they didn't speak German any longer. So going abroad per se, going into another country was not a special thing in the 80s or 90s. Going abroad across the big ocean and doing so for a longer time was unusual. So in 1988, I spent basically the entire year in the United States as a foreign exchange student. And there were maybe two or three others in my school who did the same thing. So a school with probably 1,800 students, and two or three of them went to the US or went overseas for an exchange year. That was still something special. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's changed somewhat. And I think it's also just something, I know a handful of people who did the same thing, but a handful. And my niece is actually doing this now, she's going to New Zealand. And
Oh,
there are 20 kids in her year are doing an exchange year. So that's
mm.
from 2 to 20, that's quite a jump.
I love that because in hindsight now, after all these years and seeing my children do it and see other people's children going abroad, this becoming almost a normal thing in someone's rite of passage, the more people who do that, the less misunderstandings we have across these borders. I think you cannot hate who you know well. You cannot have negative thoughts about a group of people that you spend significant time with. And the more people who allow themselves and their family members to experience that, ideally early on in their lives, maybe during formative years, that's beautiful. So I'm happy to hear that the number of students who are doing this is growing and
Yeah.
continues to grow.
And this despite the way things are these days, and then like polarization, and people are so afraid of so many things all the time. And as parents especially, we it's a different parenting that we do than that our parents did. I mean, our parents didn't know what we what we did most of the time, and now I feel like it's just too much, too much. So you could be so afraid for your child to go and venture out, and you're not there holding their hand. So it's even more special, I think, these days in some ways. But also I say this in so many episodes, I've said this, I wish it was a mandatory experience. I wish every young person would have the opportunity to go at least for 6 months to live in another country, not go on, not go backpacking. And that's great too, but go and live in a family and
Right.
experience the day-to-day life.
Yeah. And I mean, coming from a European perspective, like the two of us, it's easy to say that, and it's easy to formulate these ideas and thoughts, and because it's been baked into the European experience after World War II that we need this cross-border, cross-cultural exchange in order to keep the continent safe and at peace. So for us, it's almost a given or an expectation of life. Now, having lived here in the United States and seeing what the socioeconomic disparities are and what the access to, or the different levels of access to educations are in this country, I mean, it would be a steeper mountain to climb to reach that lofty goal of every student should be doing this. Um, but especially North Americans, maybe US more than Canadians, would really benefit from exposure to people with different backgrounds earlier in their lives in order to widen the scope of their experience.
Absolutely. I remember coming to this country, and I had so many views that I've had to revise in over the last 15 years. But I couldn't believe, why do people not have passports? That sort of thing. It was like, as a European, of course you have a passport and you travel, and the fact that there are people who don't have a passport or wouldn't even consider having a
Right.
passport, it's mind blowing. But
Right.
now, after all these years, you realize why. And like you said, the socioeconomic disparity is huge, and just the awareness is different. And also, this is a huge, huge country. in a way, as Europeans, we were just more exposed to different cultures because our countries are smaller. And so we grew up with different cultures literally on the doorstep.
Right.
So that creates a completely different perspective. I would say just a higher proportion of people had access to all that. And you don't necessarily see that it's not the same everywhere.
Right.
Yeah. So you felt like you were used to being a European with all these countries on your doorstep, and then did the high school year and then came back to Germany to finish school, I assume. And then
Yep.
how was that? How had that year changed
Difficult. Well, the year was fantastic, and it changed me in the way that it took my blinders off. Those the blinders that you put on horses to make them see only one direction, which is forward, the direction you want the horse to pull the buggy. So those blinders had come off, and I realized, oh, there's more things in life than what I thought was quote unquote normal. So this idea, the concept of normal was challenged when I was 17. Others maybe experienced that earlier in life. Others may never experience it. It was helpful for me at that age as a 17-year-old boy, hormones running wild, cocky teenager who thinks he understands the world and adults are stupid and I know what's right and what's wrong. Well, whatever you feel as a 17-year-old when you think adults, parents have nothing to teach you anymore. It was really helpful to get that checked and have a reality check in.
Yeah.
And realize that, well, there's other ways of getting from A to B, and there's other ways of living life, and there are different sets of quote unquote normal, and it is very arbitrary, this idea of normality. So that was helpful. Coming back from that experience was a shock. It tested my ability to apply what I learned, because I thought I had learned to adjust to differences. I thought I had learned to embrace the differences and eat the chicken and spit out the bone and be okay with what works and what doesn't work. And there I come back into my small town in southern Bavaria, and I felt like I didn't belong anymore. I felt like I thought, I mean, I was still cocky, right? I thought, hey, I just got back from the S. I spent a year overseas, and look at me. Aren't I great? And shouldn't you all be flocking around me in the schoolyard and listen to my stories? And they did for about 10 minutes. And that's when the novelty waned off. And like, yeah, we heard you, but it stopped being interesting. And that was a bit of a rude awakening. And coming to terms with the fact that, yes, I had gone through a different experience. That doesn't mean that the people who I left, that their life stopped during the time that I was gone. They had their experiences to which I was not witness. I had my own experiences that they won't understand. And some of the friends that I had before I went abroad remained friends because we reconnected. Other people fell off. I don't know where they are today. I have had no interest, neither did they, to continue our friendship or our connection. So it did change my course a little bit, right? Or it solidified what was important for me in life and what wasn't, because I had career goals before I went abroad. I had ideas of what I would study at university. So did my parents. They had certain ideas for me. And all of these ideas went out the window after I came back, and I did not embark on the journey that I thought was right for me. I completely changed direction and did something that was not within the expectations of my environment. So yeah, it had quite an effect on me that year.
Yeah, it sounds like it. But also it's very hard to be for a 17-year-old brain to apply what you've learned, because the maturity levels. I think with hindsight you can see exactly what
Yeah.
happened, but
Yeah.
at the time, and like you said, you come back and you have this experience, and then they've had their own
Right.
experiences. And I've found this throughout life in all the different places I've lived as well. Like every time you leave and you come back, the gap that you left behind has closed in some ways, and you have to kind
Right.
of, if you really want to open that again, you have to work at that. It's not just people are not waiting for you to come back and tell your
No,
stories.
no, none of them do. None of them do. And now I mean, we're using the word hindsight quite a bit because we have some hindsight. So now I approach these dynamics with a lot more maturity and probably
Yeah.
more balanced and emotional zen. Back then, I was more brutal. I thought I needed to change the world, and because I had seen things that others hadn't, so therefore you all follow me, and I know what we're going to do. All nonsense, of course. But yeah, when you're young, I was idealistic, and I thought of myself probably a little bit too highly, and that got
Yeah.
taken down a notch, or maybe three or four.
I love your honesty, and I think that's also something that comes with spending a long time being um not normal is not the right
Oh
word,
no, I'm
because
far
yeah,
from
what is
normal.
normal? So yeah, but I think we know that we're not normal. A lot of people don't. And that's the difference. And I think that is what was I going to say, that vulnerability comes with that experience, because you get humbled and going through these things, and so you have to look at yourself differently. Like you said, your lens of, like, I thought I was the bee's knees, and then
Right.
you do they say that in the US? I don't even
Some people do, and
some
I've heard
people do.
people say it
Okay.
before, so I think I know what you're saying.
um because
How many
I'm
knees
getting,
does a bee have?
yeah,
Six?
right.
Okay, all right, good. Just making sure I know how many knees we're talking about.
um and obviously that is something that, because you couldn't do your business if you still had that mindset of, like, what's best, you pick people up at that point, right? You're
Right.
like, I can look at this with a lot of vulnerability, and we'll talk about that later. But let's so you said you embarked on a completely different career.
Yeah.
What was it? What
Well,
was your goal, and then what changed?
let me give you a bit of a backdrop. So I was the firstborn in my family, and both my parents come from the same region, which is southern Bavaria, small townish, fairly conservative socioeconomic values. So, in American terms, um, fiscally conservative Republicans. However, socially relatively progressive, even though it's a predominantly Catholic area. My parents were not necessarily devout religious Catholics. Case in point, my mom was 5 months pregnant with me when she stepped in front of the altar with my father. So it was crystal clear that she did something what in 1970 was still somewhat frowned upon. So my parents, even though not um, revolutionaries or mavericks, but they charted their own course the way they wanted to, and yet they're small town people who have a rather small town mind and didn't have higher education. So in comes Christian, goes to a higher education facility, learns things that parents never learned, goes abroad, has that experience that the parents never had. And my aunt, who's I don't know if she's an aunt, she's my father's cousin. I don't know what that makes her.
Yeah.
And she and my dad grew up after the war like brothers and sisters.
Mm-hmm.
And she was the only one in the family who had spent time abroad in the early 1960s. And she was an au pair in the UK. And before I went abroad to the US, she took me aside at some family gathering. And she said, listen up, Christian. Nobody in your family understands this. let me tell you, because I've been through this, you will leave as a boy and you will come back as a man, and nobody in your family will understand, particularly not your father.
Wow.
Be
Wow.
ready for this. And I was like, all right, auntie, whatever. And sure enough, she was right. Right. This year abroad is a maturity accelerator, especially for a guy my age who's the firstborn, who challenges father's authority. That created some nasty stuff between me and my dad. And my father, or my parents, had a small town business. My father was a butcher. Everybody in town knew who I was because, unfortunately, I look like him. So nothing I did was ever secret, because word got around. And sure enough, before
Yeah.
I got home that day, my parents already knew what happened.
Oh, yeah, I can relate.
Yeah. So small town, that's how it
Yeah, yes.
works.
Yeah.
So the expectation originally was, well, firstborn son takes over the family business. So I worked in the butcher shop after school on on Saturdays, right? I was immersed in the family business, and there was this unspoken expectation. Well, at some point, the boy will see the light and
Mm-hmm.
become a butcher himself. And I said, no, that's not happening. So the next best thing was, okay, then you make an academic career and you do something that makes you money, that is foolproof career, that is recession proof. And at that time, late 80s, early 90s, I thought I wanted to study chemistry. I want to become a PhD in chemical, blah, blah,
Mm-hmm.
whatever that's called, and be a researcher in a lab with a white coat and make six-figure income and be the bee's knees. So I came back from the US, and none of that mattered anymore. I had other ideas. I said, no, I don't want to do this. I wanted to become a journalist, which is basically on the other end of the spectrum of parental expectations, right? Here, a science job with
Mm-hmm.
predictably good income and robust career. And on the other hand, a journalist, a guy who writes about stuff, something that we like or dislike, but is that really a job? Isn't that more like a hobby? And what the hell are you doing? So that was that pivot, right? That wasn't easily accepted in the family. And well, I followed that path. My parents had to accept that, whether or not they were really happy about it. But if you ask my dad now, he's 80 years old now, he said he probably is happy that I didn't take over the business. But
Yeah.
back then,
Yeah.
it was a big challenge.
Yeah, because I mean, just thinking that for them, also hindsight, right?
There it
And
is
just
again,
kind of thinking about, because they're doing their parent job for the first time too, right? So it's
right?
like they have to, and I'm sure, like talking to my parents these days, I think there are plenty of things they even say they would have done completely differently with the knowledge they have now. But I mean, that's life, isn't it? So
Yeah,
the
there is.
decisions we make, but sometimes it's following your gut and saying no to things, and that opens you up automatically to a lot of things. So
Well,
then
it opened me up to uncertainty. Yeah,
mhm,
I deliberately chose the path less predictable and less
yeah.
secure. I didn't go to Munich to study. I went to another smaller town in the south, a town called Passau, which is right there on the border with Austria and
Mhm.
close to the Czech Republic, and studied there. And after that, moved to Munich for my first job in journalism and lived in Munich for several years. Um, and I was privileged, blessed, successful, maybe lucky, maybe I just was
Yeah.
good to a certain degree as well to make it in that career. And I think I did quite okay during my time. And I'm in hindsight, I'm happy with the choice I made. I think
Mhm.
I given or presented with the same decision making, I probably would choose the same again.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think maybe, I mean, that's because you had spent that year doing something that no one else did, opened you up to that level of knowing what it's like to live with the unknown? Because I think that's also when you go to school and you kind of, you have your goals, and then you break that, and then you immerse yourself into something completely different, and it opens up that level of discomfort in a lot of ways when you go to a new place and you don't know anything, because all your predictability has disappeared, and you have to sit in that feeling like I have no idea what I'm doing here. And that, I think, to experience that at a relatively young age is probably the biggest thing that happened to you, that being able to cope with something like that, and maybe not just cope but actually thrive.
I'm going to say something that I probably haven't said like this before, but you just triggered that. I think, and maybe this again is hindsight, who knows, I need that feeling of not knowing what's next. It's almost like a junkie needs that next hit. Of course, when I was in my 20s, not knowing what's next, not knowing how to pay the next bill was not always a pleasant state to be in. And yet the idea that anything is possible, that is adrenaline and all the other uh, addictive hormones all together in one happy cocktail. And I love that. So yeah, I think I need that uncertainty in order to be triggered.
Oh, I can totally relate to that, and it's exactly that. It's adrenaline that comes with a new place, and all the
right,
just the unknown, and falling into that. As much as I love my safety and the square boxes from time to time, but I crave the adrenaline that comes, and I'm addicted to it too. And I think once you've done that, it's really difficult to settle.
It is.
Yeah. But moving on, so you were working in Munich, and you said you were pretty successful. Where did the move to the US happen? How did that come about?
Well, I think that is a common denominator in many stories. When the love of my life entered my life, that was what shifted it again. So I met my wife.
I relate to that as well.
When I met my wife in Munich in 1999, we quickly realized that we both had a past in the US. And yes, she's also German, and she's a dual citizen because of her family story. And we were both working in media, and we both went through some career challenges. And at the end of 2003, we were confronted with the choice of moving to Berlin for the next step, or to do something completely different. And we spent that Christmas 2003 with her family in the US. And we decided, why don't we move here? And we didn't move here, and here being the US, we didn't move here as expatriates. We didn't move here with an employment package and benefits and a move stipend and logistics support. We moved by ourselves on our own dime without any type of corporate support, which, again, in hindsight, there it is. I think that's got to be in the headlines somewhere in this podcast. So it was a rather naive decision, and yet we had a plan. And not everybody saw the benefit of the plan. People, including my closest family, said, what if this doesn't work? To which my wife responded, well, what if it does? And that it did, right? So it challenged the status quo again. It's challenged the quote unquote normal, and we did. It was probably not a economically sound decision to do it that way. And yet at that point, there was no other option for us. If we wanted to move to the US, we had to do it ourselves. We were both not out of a job, but we were both deliberately interrupting our careers. I had a job offer to become a general manager for a new project in Berlin, which at that time sounded really tempting. I would have been the boss of the thing. It would have been a career step up. And yet it was not something that I felt passionate about. And instead, we did something that was a much more risky endeavor to go abroad on your own dime and start over. And I was an independent journalist. I was a U.S. correspondent for a couple of media outlets in Europe. And my wife started a Montessori school. She had started building that while we were still in Munich. And if you're familiar with Munich real estate and red tape in Germany, then I don't have to explain to you how challenging that was at that time. So she continued doing that in the Tennessee Valley, of all places, outside of Chattanooga, Tennessee, a Montessori school. And I kid you not, there were parents who brought their kids to that school who called it the monastery school.
Yeah, it fully
There were no
expecting.
nuns.
Looking at the demographic, that area, you're talking pretty deep Republican South,
Yes.
which hasn't changed that much, maybe with the exception of some of the bigger cities. But
Right.
so that sounds very adventurous, to put it mildly.
Yes. And it what if it doesn't work? It did work.
Yeah.
So the school has now, well, the school year just ended as we are recording this. And during the summer break, the school is moving into yet another bigger building. My wife is no longer in the day-to-day. She holds a minority stake in the business, but she's basically consulting for it. The operational leadership has long passed on to a young couple who have the drive and the energy and the vision. And the school is now, I think, more than 200 kids. And my wife started out with 4.
Amazing. Yeah. So what did you do when, I mean, she had that vision, and did you participate in her vision, or did you already feel like you had ideas for something else? Because I mean, this is the thing, the US, and like you mentioned, there's not as much red tape, plenty of red tape in all sorts of areas, but founding a business,
that was fairly easy. You go online and you start an LLC, and there you are. And then pay your taxes and do your thing. What I originally did was still write. So I followed still my journalistic passion, and that kept us afloat in the first couple of years because I had some solid contracts with media outlets in Europe. I mean, I left that world in a leadership position. I was the co-editor in chief of the magazine that I worked for. So I had built a network, a global network, and I had access to the right people in my industry in order to continue what I did. And yet I kind of lost the drive for that. And the area where we moved to, the Tennessee Valley, went through a massive change. As you described, rather Southern conservative, religiously conservative, predominantly white, and also very not global. And that area that changed significantly when German companies began investing there. So there were 2 big cornerstone foreign direct investment projects, both coming from German companies, and they built greenfield plants there. One making cars, the other one making a chemical product that goes into our computer chips and our solar panels. So these were 2 huge projects that also drove or attracted a lot of the supply base around it that brought more global entities to that area, not just German, but European, Asian, South American suppliers to these cornerstone investments. And all of a sudden, the Tennessee Valley went global overnight, it felt like. And I was the only German, or my wife and I were the only Germans in the area who had begun building a business network. We were networking with the chambers, with Rotarians, with economic development boards, with decision makers, movers and shakers. So we were the only Germans that the locals knew. And then these multi-billion, with a B, multi-billion dollar investments rolled in, and they were like, holy crap, the Germans are coming. What do we do now? We don't know how to deal with them. Who knows how to deal with the Germans? Wait a second, there's this Christian guy. Let's talk to him. So I found myself being the cultural bridge. I found myself being in German, I would probably say Kulturdolmetscher, an interpreter, not just linguistically, but also, hey, this is what they expect. This is the mindset they're coming with, and be ready for this.
Yeah, because this is the thing, because you, with the global expansion, and people, I would say, especially coming from maybe from Germany or European countries where people speak English to some degree and think, oh, how hard can it be? I can speak the language, and maybe I've read up on some customs and some etiquette, but and I guess that's where that's where we really start talking about your business, because it's not just that. But no, I imagine that was the situation at the time. They're like sending Germans in, and there's the manager in Germany who speaks excellent English and knows how to run a business, and then thinks, oh, I'll just go over there, and I'm being given this job, and now I'm gonna do the same thing.
Right.
And I guess that's where you come in.
And here's a challenge with this, especially coming from Germany. A lot of Germans are a lot of Europeans are usually well traveled, and a lot of Germans have been to the US. The US has had a huge impact on post-war German culture because of the Allied occupation in southern and western Germany. To this day, there are US military bases. My generation, Xers, millennials, boomers, grew up with US culture, pop culture. We traveled to the US, to New York, to the Grand Canyon, to the Florida beaches. The Germans, we think we get the Americans. Plus, for generations, we've read the adventure novels written by Karl May, thinking that, by the way, to this day, the most successful German writer of all time, right, by copies sold. So we think the image we have of America is a rather incomplete one, sometimes completely wrong one. So you come here as an executive, as a manager, as a specialist for your organization, and you think, well, how hard can it be? I get this country. I've been here before. I've visited New York. I was here in December for Christmas shopping. So I get this. And then you come to the Tennessee Valley, to the BFE, to the armpit, so to say. And if you don't know what BFE is, look it up. I'm not going to say it.
I'm going to put it in the show notes.
Thank you. And you realize, darn it, this is actually not what I thought this country would be like. And I don't really understand what's going on. And the same is true for the Americans, right? They have this idea of what Germany is like, because the image of Germany in the United States is heavily influenced by the experience US soldiers had in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and going onward. And all the German stereotypes that Americans have are, well, I hate to say it, where the two of us are from, right? Southern Bavaria. That's what shaped the stereotypes about Germany. Now, if you're a German professional coming from anywhere in Germany but Bavaria, and you're being sent to the US, and people think of you, oh, Lederhosen, Oompa music, Bratwurst and sauerkraut and Oktoberfest, and Sound of Music, or whatever other thing you want to put into that. Somebody from Northern Germany will not fit that stereotype, period.
Yeah.
And they will feel alienated by those stereotypes. So it's more than the do's and don'ts. It's more than the etiquette. It's understanding the whys of human behavior. What drives the behavior? Why do people do the do's, and why don't they do the don'ts? And how can we understand each other at a deeper level? That's what I realized is my work.
Yeah.
And that's what I've been doing for the past 16 years.
And so I love your tagline on LinkedIn where you say you can be successful when working across cultures. You can also be insistent on continuing to do business your way. You can't be both. It's your call.
Yep.
I love it. It cuts right to the chase.
Right.
You need to get over yourself and you need to be vulnerable. And that's where I feel like, but because you've gone through all these moments of kind of self-discovery and you had that vulnerability, even at that point, you realize that your story would be, you can see where people are
Right.
at.
Right.
And
And I usually approach client engagement just with that. I present them with my vulnerability, which with US clients work smoothly usually. And I was surprised how much welcomed my vulnerability was or is. With Germans, sometimes that was an uphill battle. Showing a fellow German vulnerability makes them a little bit queasy. And modeling it for them and saying, okay, but this is the strategy, this is what's going to help you here, is it's not always an easy exercise. It is rewarding nevertheless.
Yeah. Do you have maybe an example? Like, can you talk us through an experience with a customer who came in all guns blazing and then had to kind of embrace a different approach?
I think what helps, and I know this is super generalized, what helps is my Bavarianness. And for those of you who don't understand the regional identities of Germany, Bavaria is in the southeast of the country, used to be a sovereign nation for a while. We had our own king. We were not part of any of the big empires until the late 1800s. And even to this day, our tribe, if you will, and that's what the Romans called us. The Romans gave us that tribal name. They called us Bavarii. Our tribe, our Bavarianness is anathema to a lot of the standard German behaviors. And I would say we are sometimes belittled for that or ridiculed for our quirkiness or our strangeness. And growing up with that is not like a chip on your shoulder. It's more, I think it's more like a superpower thing. And okay, so I'm not really mainstream German, but I'm also not something else. So I can play that a little bit. So with Northern Germans, and this particular company was or is from Northern Germany that I worked with first, I could play on that a little bit and say, okay, here I am, not like you. We happen to speak the same language, but let's face it, I'm a little different than you. And here's what I learned. So that helped. And then I think this is at a second level, or at not the 101, it's maybe the 102 course, so to say. I found very early on that there's a parallel in the US and the German experience historically. There are several historic parallels. They're not necessarily connected immediately, but they happened at the same time in history, and they had a similar effect on societal development. One is the Civil War, which in the US South is still not celebrated, but it's commemorated everywhere you go. It is tattooed into the soul of the culture. And it is at the same time that in Europe, Bavaria and other southern entities became part of the bigger German Empire. So that happened at around the same time. And then you look at the Holocaust in Germany and you look at slavery in the US and how both societies have dealt with the legacy of these historic events. And there is a significant difference between how the US deals with their legacy of slavery and how Germany deals with its murderous past. And drawing that out in training programs and coaching engagements, helping Germans bring out their, I don't call it guilt complex, I call it their historic responsibility.
Yeah.
that's the Achilles heel of every German, if you will. If you know where to push that button,
mm-hmm.
the humility will kick in.
Yeah.
At different levels, different degrees, depending on personality,
Mm-hmm.
but usually that's where I can access the conscience, the ethics and moral
Mm-hmm.
center of the German brain. And when I get there, we're not far from tears, right? Or we are at that point where vulnerability kicks in.
Vulnerability
Right.
again. That's amazing. Yeah. Yeah.
And as Brene Brown said, Dr. Brene Brown said, it's a superpower, not a weakness, the vulnerability.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. God, yeah. I never put the Civil War and the formation of Germany as we know it like today. I never put that in the same. But
Deutsche Bund, German. I don't know what that is in English. 1866. Civil War ends in 1865. So we have about the same time in history.
Fascinating. I mean, I can relate a little bit to the Bavarianness as well, because I lived in Texas for a long time, and I felt way more connected where people from where I am now, and like the Yankees from like the North, don't get or ridicule, like to ridicule the Texan stereotype. And I've always felt really strange about that and kind of uncomfortable, because I'm like, no, I know where they're coming from, because this is, it's Texas is the Bavaria of the US. There is
it
and
though?
I guess that
is it though?
Well, but it speaks for parts of the South as well, and there is a lot of overlap. When you were talking earlier about your parents being very conservative, but also kind of progressive, that is a quality that actually exists in Texas. And this is a really interesting thing that is that's that kind of complete where you're like, but how can you come up with a politics like that and then yet be super innovative in other ways?
Yeah, I agree with that. That you find that in Texas, but you don't necessarily find that in other parts of the US South. I mean, I live in Atlanta, you find that here.
Yeah.
You may find it in Birmingham, Alabama, you may find it in Charlotte, North Carolina. But throughout the South, this mix of fiscal or political conservative mindset paired with a progressive, let's get it done kind of attitude, that is, Texas would be the poster child for that. I agree.
Yeah. So, and that's where I just see some parallels, and I never felt as uncomfortable with certain like behaviors, or, people even like wearing hats and boots and stuff, where other people would be like, oh my God. And I'm like, but no, but I grew up with people turning out with lederhosen to things.
Here's a fun fact around this. Here's where that parallel came full circle for my work, because I then, after I dealt with that Northern German company, my next big German client was a Bavarian company setting up shop in Tennessee. And that company sent local hires from Tennessee or the general area. They had to train them in the machinery, on the equipment, which hadn't been built in Tennessee. So they sent them to Bavaria for 6 months to 18 months to get trained. So we did training for the US employees about working and living in southern Germany, what to expect, not only do's and don'ts, but whys, right? And I drew on the parallels because I usually don't lead with, hey, these are the differences that you have to address or come to terms with. Here are the similarities you can find and build upon, right? That's more important. Yes, the differences are important, but they're not helping us understanding each other better. We need to find bridges. Where do we connect in light of all those differences? So I told them, hey, you're Southerners, you're going to meet German Southerners, and here's what you guys may have in common. You'll find out. Sure enough, about 50% of those Americans who went on this assignment to Bavaria bought a pair of lederhosen, brought it back to the US, are still wearing them for certain events. I know it's quirky. I know it's tacky. It did the job.
Yeah, love that. Yeah, that's awesome.
Can you imagine the Tennessee Valley good old boys in a pair of Krachlederne?
Man. Yeah, lovely. Yeah, but why not? It's kind of, let's not talk about cultural appropriation, but but that general attitude of just embracing the similarities, I love that.
Yeah.
Because that, I feel, is such an issue, such a big issue, because when you focus on the differences so much, then everyone has their guard up, and that means you're not open. So I feel like when my first experience of cultural difference in a work environment was the UK. And so the UK and the US, that's a whole other issue, because we have people who are speaking the same language theoretically, and yet they're probably even more wildly different than the Americans and the Germans in terms of doing business.
Perhaps, yes. Yeah. Depends on which region we're talking about. Yes, I agree.
Yeah, but the that attitude of oh well, we're going to conquer America, that sort of that exists big time in the UK, or at least it did. And maybe things are changing as well. But I feel like the way a work is done is even more different, maybe.
It is. By the way, I have a visceral reaction to the word conquering, especially when it leaves the mouths of Germans or British people.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, we can talk about these historic dynamics all day. At the end of a client engagement with my customers, that is usually an afterthought. What they want to know is, how do I get the best out of my people? How can I become profitable in this foreign land? Am I hiring the right people? Am I holding on to the wrong people? How do I talk to my customers? How do I talk to my suppliers? How do I lead? How do I give feedback? All of these questions are immediately bottom line relevant for our clients. And all of these questions are impacted by culture. And Lou Gerstner, who was a longtime CEO of IBM, he famously said, and I'm probably not quoting him verbatim because I don't remember it exactly, but he said something like, throughout my career, I realized that culture isn't a piece of the puzzle. Culture is the puzzle.
Yeah.
And that's what professionals who work in a global environment at some point understand. And if they don't, they'll fail. And usually in the beginning, when I work with customers, or one of my associates works with our customers, there is sometimes a resistance to that statement, or there's no very limited awareness of that. And they think they can break into it because I've done it this way for years and I've been successful because of this. And at home, I did all this, and look where it got me. Now I got this job because I was so successful. And now I'm going to do it exactly like this because that's what the company wants me to do, to be successful here as well, until they realize it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
And learning that and accepting that and being willing, after having reached a certain level of success in your career, to learn something new and maybe change your approach in order to grow further. Not everybody is willing to do that. And even those who are don't necessarily have the wherewithal to do that intuitively. And we, obviously, those who come to us, they have the awareness that they need help, right? Which is fantastic. Though those who fail probably never call us.
Yeah. So, well, that's what was going to be my next question. How do you approach the companies? How do you get them to realize that they need you? Because, I mean, that's, I guess, what sets you apart from, say, relocation agencies and etiquette classes and that sort of stuff. Because, I mean, those, I think people are generally aware of needing some of those, needing maybe help with, and there's some amazing like the companies who send their people with these huge packages, and it includes a relocation consultant and stuff like that. And you need that. Maybe you need to learn the language. Maybe you need some, that, but you don't necessarily know that you need a cultural mindset switch. And so how do you get
most don't. That's right.
Yeah.
Most people don't enter the foreign adventure with that awareness. That's true. Unfortunately, a lot of our clients have been hurt before. They've fallen on their face before. We are the Band-Aid and the aspirin. Of course, you'd rather have a proactive client who says, okay, let me prepare for this and prevent me from falling or hurting myself. I learned over the years it doesn't really matter. I'm okay with clients who screwed it up, because then the pain point is so high that they say, I cannot have this happen again. And my favorite story over the last 2 years is one of an existing client. Yes, another German company. It's I would say an SME, small mid-size, or in Germany they call them KMU, kleines und mittelständisches Unternehmen. I don't know, they have about 5,000 people or so, and they're an automotive supplier, and they invested heavily in the state of Georgia in the US, $85 million, the single biggest investment that company had ever done anywhere. And they sent 2 people from Germany to lead this plant, to build it and then make it operational. Not just the construction part, but also the commissioning part and then operations. It just so happens that these 2 people are a married couple, and they're past 55. And this was the first time in the US for them. And they severely struggled. They lost employees, key employees. They ruffled feathers with the big customer that they're serving. And this all happened during the tail end of COVID. So this was a shit show. And the head of the North American operations called me and said, hey, this is what's going on. Our $85 million investment is on the line, and we cannot risk this to go sour. What do we do? I ran out of ways. I don't know what to do next.
Yeah.
And we were given your name. I don't know what you do and how you think you could do it, but I need to sit down with you. And 2 years later, these 2 executives that they had sent, and they were, let's say, dysfunctional at that time and not effective for the company. 2 years ago, the company was about to either fire them or pull them back to Germany and plan D or F, right?
What a horrible way to kind of possibly end a career. Yeah.
Not only that, but also sink an investment like that. It was at the tipping point. Now, 2 years later, this married couple are ending their assignment. It's officially over. They're going back to Germany. The team who wanted to get rid of them 2 years ago, who wanted nothing to do with them, who hated their guts, threw a surprise going away party for them. They were hugging and crying it out. Oh man, why are you leaving? So long story short, we helped them find the similarities. We helped them connect in a way that they were unable to do by themselves. And we saved the company an $85 million investment, which was on the brink of collapse. So when people say, oh, Christian, you guys do that soft skills stuff, all the hair on my back and down my spine stands up and like, what did you say? Did you just say soft skills?
Yeah.
I don't like the terminology.
No.
I know what it means. I know why people call it that. I make it a point to say that soft usually implies nice to have, not really important, whereas hard apparently implies
Hmm.
super important
Yeah.
and to be prioritized. Now, in a case like the one I just told, these presumably softer skills were
Yeah.
not there and therefore would have cost the company a lot of money. So how soft are these skills then, really?
Yeah. That's
Now
it's
that
a
they've developed them.
that's a very very kind of traditional patriarchal term, I think, the whole hard skills, soft skills
It is.
discussion. But can you, I mean, just kind of going back to that couple's experience at first. So what changed? What did you get them? How did they ruffle feathers when they first? Just to give kind of for listeners to give an example, how can a successful German team leader get it so wrong? What can happen?
Well, I think the first thing that he got wrong was expecting the same behaviors from US employees that he had gotten from his German employees before. That includes, he thought that giving feedback the way he does in Germany would have the same effect here in the United States, which it doesn't. German feedback is very blunt and to the core of the subject matter. It is, it can be quite confrontational, and it can be in certain industries. Automotive is no different. It can be very abrasive and can be very abrupt. And in the German culture, that feedback is usually completely separate from the personal relationship. So a German will give negative feedback in a very unmistakable, hyper direct form without attacking the person, without impacting the personal relationship. I can tell you, you did a shitty job and you've continued to do that for the past week. And we talked about this before, right? And I could really tell you off about your performance. And then afterward, we would still go for an after hours drink and we would
Yeah.
celebrate our professional
Mm-hmm.
connection or friendship. That does not work in the US. And so his feedback style, we needed to work on that. And he needed to be vulnerable, right? So we addressed that very early on. Also, the expectations, especially in manufacturing by European investors in the US, is very often that the labor force, the workforce comes at an expertise level that would compare to that they find in Europe. And that's usually not the case because there is no the levels of technical training
Yeah.
and craftsman training and instruction in Europe is different than it is in the United States. So the expectation, the erroneous expectation by this German executive was that he would find the same caliber of workforce in the US, and then people got hired and they didn't perform to his expectations, which caused a lot of frustration. And the third piece was that he expected the same level of loyalty to the company.
Mm-hmm.
In traditional industries in the German speaking world, I know this is changing, but traditionally speaking, in steel, in any type of manufacturing in the German speaking world, if you've gone through the professional training, the apprenticeship program, a 2, 3, 4 year long, very hands on educational process, you are typically loyal to the company in which you were brought up. And this sometimes leads to 20, 30, 40 year tenures at these companies. And that is quite a rarity in the United States, where people, especially on a shop floor level, at an hourly pay rate, not salaried employees, those employer employee relationships are very transactional, and usually there's an expiration date to those,
Yeah.
maybe a year or 2 or 3 tops, right? And that frustrated him as well, because he thought, well, how am I going to build a long lasting legacy team here if they're jumping ship after 9 months because the company across the street pays 75 cents an hour more than we do.
Yeah.
So those were some of the factors that really irked him and that we needed to work through. And he needed to understand the whys of these behaviors. And once he understood why this happens, he could develop different strategies and a different approach. So he was humble enough to recognize, all right, I didn't know this. Now that I do, I can adjust my strategy, which I told him this multiple times. I have the highest respect for him because for a man pushing 60 who had been very successful in his career up until then, to learn something new is not necessarily a given. And I have
No, it's a
high
hard pill to
respect for him
swallow.
that he did.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he did.
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
got the result. And he's proud of himself looking back on that accomplishment.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. But it shows also how deeply, deeply ingrained our expectations and education as well is. It's just realizing that there are differences, because that's the thing. People who haven't experienced life in another culture don't necessarily see the vastly different expectations.
I don't know, was it Buddha? I'm not a Buddhist, so I'm not sure if I'm recollecting this correctly, but I think it's a Buddhist principle that the root cause of all suffering is holding on to your expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And there, I think, even though I grew up in a Christian world, I think there is some elegant truth to this, because if we're so focused on our predetermined expectations, the outcomes will not always be as we expect, and that can be frustrating. And the more we can let go of that, which is easy said, because in a corporate context, I have certain expectations of the performance of the company, and I cannot simply let go of those. I get that. But the human factor, I can definitely let go of some expectations.
And I do think this is changing attitudes. And this is, I mean, I guess still in the US, the amount of people in high management positions who seek coaching and mental training, all sorts of things, is still much, much higher than in, say, European countries. I might be generalizing now, but the awareness, I think, is growing everywhere, that there's a need for that, and the vulnerability to let that be a big factor in the growth mindset.
I agree. And maybe it's because we both play in an area where we're dealing with entrepreneurs, that we can agree on this. And I think this is one of the huge factors why I still prefer to live in the US over Europe, is the fact that entrepreneurship in the US is something that is taught early on, and that there is a cultural acceptance of everything entrepreneurial, including the falling flat on your face disasters that you can experience.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And those failures are not taught as a failure, they're taught as a feedback moment, as a learning moment.
Yes.
Whereas
100%.
the way you and I grew up, we're not taught to go out and fail freely. We're taught to do your homework and don't screw up the minute you leave the house, because you won't look good if you screw it up. It will be a ding on your reputation. So, and I realize this every time I come back to Europe, that the degree of entrepreneurial thinking, whether you own a business or not, is beside the point. You can have entrepreneurial thinking even though you're employed somewhere. I think they're called intrapreneurs or something. But that mindset of thinking like you own this place, and you make decisions based on that mindset, that is something I don't see to the same degree in Europe, especially in the German-speaking part of Europe, the way I see it here in North America. And there is and maybe this is just my very subjective observation, but I think there's a lot more expectation in the German society of what society is supposed to give us back. There's a level of entitlement. So I pay my taxes, I do all of this, now I expect this in return. And here in North America, nobody owes you anything. So if you want it, you got to get it.
But that's the difference, the highly individualistic society here, as opposed
Right.
to the more collective mindset
Correct.
in
Yeah.
in Europe. That's a general thing. And I think for you and I, who've brought up a family in the US, and because I always feel like I've learned how the US works through my kids and seeing them go through school, and the way the way they learn, the projects they do at school. And like you said, they are brought up to the entrepreneurial mindset is there, and they are encouraged to venture out and do things and fail, and it's all part of the experience, and it gets talked about, and it's not frowned upon. And so I 100% agree with that. And that's also why I love being here, because you just have the generally positive response to ideas.
In the case of our oldest daughter, she was 19 when she said, "Hey, mom, dad, I'm moving back to Europe," which is entrepreneurial thinking, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
do this because
Mm-hmm.
I have an idea for what my future looks like. So she's been living in Munich, the place where she was born, she's been back there for 2 years. And even though, I mean, she's young, she's about to be 22, and there's, of course, at that age, you're more idealism, a little
Yeah.
bit more social consciousness than I have in my cynical 50s. Um, and yet she hasn't lost that spirit of, oh, let me just try this, I'll do it,
Yeah.
which I don't necessarily think this is typical for her generation. And our daughter is an aspiring actress, so she has a profession that is not your typical 9 to 5. And the amount of adventurousness she still displays and the level of
Mm-hmm.
curiosity she still has, and says, okay, what's next? Let's do it. Well, what's it going to take? What can I do? I'm happy to see that this spirit does not get drowned out, even though she is in a different environment now.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's beautiful. That's her American spirit coming through right there. I
I
love
think
it.
I'd like to think so. Yes.
Well, I guess this will be a good point to wind down our conversation. I'm just looking at the time, so
Mm.
um, conscious of the fact that it's a holiday today. We
Mm.
need to get out. Um, but yeah, let's talk a little bit more about your company. So you're the president and CEO of the Culture Mastery, but I've also seen somewhere, and you've talked about being a fractional CCO.
Yeah.
So I'd like to know more about that, and then maybe all the other things that you've added to your repertoire.
Yeah, they're line extensions of the existing business, right? So the company is the Culture Mastery, and we, as you probably heard me say before, so we work with corporate clients. These are training, coaching, mentoring engagements at different levels. And as we go deeper with some of these companies, we talk to the C level or to senior executives more and more so than I did 16 years ago when I started out. Right. So we are what I call a fractional CCO, a chief culture officer, and fractional meaning we're not employed by the organization. We do
Mm-hmm.
this as a fractional service. So we are embedded with the senior leadership of an organization, and we remove some of the cultural blind spots that they have. So the example that I shared earlier about this $85 million investment, that's
Mm-hmm.
basically what we do, right? The CEO of that company has me on speed dial. He happens to live in Canada, and he crosses the border across the bridge in Detroit twice a day. And on his way to work or on his way back home, he gives me a call and says, "Hey, you know what happened today? And this sucks. And I'm not sure what we're going to do next." So that is a level of engagement that goes beyond, "Hey, come here, do a training and leave
Yeah.
again." Right. So we're deeply embedded with our partners. So that's a relationship that is also the most rewarding for me, because you get to create something. You can leave a legacy in that organization by improving their path forward. That's why I do the work that I do, because
Yeah.
I can look back and say, damn it, we helped them save $85 million. That's pretty
Mm-hmm.
pretty
Mm-hmm.
fantastic. Um, And another line extension that we launched last year and that we're continuing going forward is the Culture Mastermind. It is a 5-day full immersion program, usually for more, let's say, experienced clients who've done business with us before, who know what our work entails. So it's not usually for newbies. And we take them out of their known zone, out of their comfort zone for 5 days, and we fire hose them with information and activities that they don't see coming, and that will challenge their sense of normal. And we did it last year in Munich. We're going to do it again this year in Munich. There will be other cities or other places in the world where I could see us do that as well. Munich was just a low-hanging fruit for me because I'm intuitively familiar with the city, and most of our clients are not, which is a fantastic fit. So we can throw curveballs at them all day. And it is a classical mastermind, meaning it is a group of peers who learn from each other and teach each other and are of service to one another. And there is outside impulses. So we have experts who come in to talk on certain topics, business related, whether it be team building, HR, whether it would be strategy planning, whether it would be, you name it. We pick different experts for different groups, and these are usually seasoned, experienced people in their field. So last year we had I don't want to name the names, but he is the senior executive for Apple Computer in Europe. He's from the US and has lived in Europe. So other people who have crossed cultures professionally and in higher levels of operations, who get to share their best practices and experiences with our participants. And there's also, we call them culinary and cultural excursions. So
But that sounds fun, especially around Christmas time.
Yes, of course. I mean, that's a given that there is a Christkindlmarkt somewhere in the but it goes way beyond that. So I can't give that away here, but it has something to do with culinary stuff that also challenges their comfort zone. They will do something that they've likely never done before, and they will learn something from these activities. So it's 5 days of intense stuff, and our clients say, well, will I have time to do this, and this while I'm there? I said, no, you won't. Nope. If you want to do this and this, book an extra day, 2, 3 a week after or before that. But during the 5 days, we'll start at 8 and we finish at midnight, and you love us for it, right? It's super.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Yeah, but your clients, I mean, obviously with your background, so you from Germany, you live in the US, but your clients are global, right? Because I guess the mindset and this approach to bridge, to build cultural bridges and to to discover vulnerabilities and communalities and all that is an international one. So I guess your portfolio is probably,
it is usually within the G20 nations, to be fair. Yep. And yet, I mean, right now I'm talking to I thought he was Chilean. Turns out he is Catalonian, who's lived in Chile for way too long, who is leading an Austrian company in the US, right? Take that.
Yeah.
Or a Italian who's leading a German company abroad, or a Brazilian going to Mexico. So, or just recently we did a very deep engagement with a Japanese, Brazilian, US conglomerate, and trying to get those 3 cultures in sync with one another. So it really crosses the globe, but it's usually within the G20 nations, because those are the markets that can sustain global companies like that.
Sounds fascinating. Sounds like a really, really great career. So my next question is, how can I work with you? I'm not really kidding, but let's finish the way I normally finish my conversations, with a little bit more personal question. I ask this every guest. What do you do when you have those days when you just miss your home country, or where you're just like, I need that connection? What do you do? Is there a food? Is there a ritual? What is it that you do?
First of all, I rarely miss my home country. I rarely do. What I miss more than my home country is the ability to drive for 3 hours, go south, and be in Italy. That's what I miss more than my home country. I have a strong affinity to Italy. And yet sometimes, especially now when spring begins to turn to summer in Europe, the vibe in May, June, July in Munich on the Isar River is incomparable. There is nothing that beats that early summer Munich vibe. And that's when I miss Munich.
Mm-hmm.
So probably watching a YouTube video of Eisbach surfers or people laying in the grass in the English garden with, I don't know, whatever they do, reminiscing about that, right?
Yeah.
And even though I'm not a fan of their music in particular, but there's this one song by Spider Murphy Gang, he left nackt durch den englischen Garten, sitzt high am Monopterus. That kind of stuff, that gets me right. Yes. And then, just like I did this past weekend, I booked a flight.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here today. So much fun talking to you. And like I said, we could probably talk for hours.
We probably could.
What a conversation. I would like to thank Christian again for this deep dive into culture and all its ramifications. I love how honest and self-critical and reflective he is, and the work he does is so important and fascinating. I could talk about this stuff literally for days. If you're interested in Christian's work at the Culture Mastery, I've put, and maybe you're interested in the Culture Mastermind too, I've put all the links to his website, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, in the show notes. Oh yeah, we didn't actually get to talk about his YouTube channel that he has with another expat, Australian Brett Parry. It's called Two Chaps, Many Cultures. It's a really informative and also very funny podcast. We recorded this episode on Memorial Day, which was at the end of May. And when I sat down last week to edit everything, I realized that was before the weather in southern Germany took a nosedive, and they had so much rain, and it was actually horrendous. There was so much flooding and infrastructure breakdowns, and it was really serious. So when Christian talks about the beauty of early summer in Munich, well, maybe not this year. And if you're listening to this and you are in Bavaria and other areas that were affected, I'm so sorry, and I really hope that the rest of the summer is gorgeous. As ever, thank you very much for listening. Make sure you subscribe, recommend, rate, write reviews, get in touch with me. Maybe you want to tell your story. You know, there are 3 options now. Tell your story in English or German, or give me a little guided tour of the place where you live. If you want to know more or get in touch or simply just connect, then send me a message. Always happy to set up a conversation. And that is it for today. Have a beautiful day, week, month, and see you next time.